he said it out loud. He says, listen, it won't be any bloodshed as long as the left allows what is about to happen to happen. I'm paraphrasing. Here it is.
Let me speak about the radical left. You and I have both been parts of faculties and faculty senates and understand that the left has taken over our institutions. The reason that they are apoplectic right now, the reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
You heard it. Now, those on the Christian right, they've been saying things like this for a few years now. With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called Indisputable, we just need 1% of the viewers to become a paid member so we can continue to bring this content to you. Now back to the show. Put up the picture full mask. Let me explain who he is and why he is a Trumpite. The president of the Heritage Foundation on Tuesday declared that a new revolution is already underway in the US, appearing to warn liberals that violence could erupt if they tried to stop it. Kevin Roberts, whose uber conservative think tank is behind the highly controversial Project 2025. We'll talk about that. It's a blueprint for the second Donald Trump presidency. Made the comment during an appearance on Real America's Voice, quote, "We are in the process of the second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be." Keep that picture up. I want to remind everyone that during January 6th, the terrorist attack that took place, this was Donald Trump letting the world know and letting people like him know that he's ready to go all out, everything on the table. He will excite his base to violence. And that's what he did. The Project 2025 calls for a huge increase in presidential power. But I thought they like less government, as well as a transformation of the federal government, replacing existing staffers with an army of Trump loyalists. Roberts has previously said he sees his organization's role as, quote, institutionalizing Trumpism, whatever the hell that means. In his interview Tuesday, Roberts said that despite, quote, all this nonsense from the left, which is about democracy, by the way, we are going to win. We're in the process of taking this country back, he said. No one in the audience should be despairing. These individuals have abandoned the principles of the democratic process. These individuals wanted to overthrow the government by stopping a constitutionally mandated process. It's called certification of a presidential election. They want to be in an undefined territory constitutionally and legally in order to default to this, well, we can always take up arms against the government, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why they have decided to abandon the principles of the Constitution, something they used to proclaim, is because they realize that the Constitution has become this growing document. And this growing document allows for rights, privileges, and freedoms if interpreted by good faith judges. So they changed the rules. Understand the Constitution sets the rules. So they're changing the rules. There's more. He also opined on the US Supreme Court's decision, a ruling granting president's immunity for official acts. He said it is vital, mentioning Alexander Hamilton's view of the importance of a, quote, vigorous executive. Roberts then turned his attention to the radical left, as he called it. Talk of bloodshed has been a disturbing theme running through conservative rhetoric during this election cycle. Trump sparked controversy in May, predicting a, quote, bloodbath for the country if he did not win in November. Later saying he was only referring to the auto industry. The Republican National Committee launched a Biden bloodbath website the following month amid the unusually high interest in the word. So in April, Trump was posed the question if he thought there would be political violence if he loses in November. Now, before I continue that, understand the questions have now changed. Donald Trump gets questions about, will you call for violence against citizens if you don't win? The question used to be, sir, will you just concede that you lost the election? Will you just admit that you did not win? Will you pick up the phone and call your opponent and say, job well done? Those questions are no more. Now the journalists and mainstream media are asking the man who is the de facto Republican nominee for president, former president of the United States, sir, if you don't win, are you going to commit treason like you did before? Because the question is only relevant because of his actions at the end of his presidency prior. There's more. So Axios reported that Trump allies are already pre-screening thousands of potential employees. Remember, they're trying to overthrow all federal employees at one time through executive action. Potential employees and appointees by political ideology first. This is the concept of people like Hitler and others. Political ideology has to be primary. And they're checking to see if would-be candidates are loyal to Trump, a man who's really barely that. While most of the public attention has been focused on the plans to restructure the government, the blueprint also revives a failed push to add a citizen question to the census. Let me explain that, because I saw some of the rhetoric on social media saying, well, that's not a big deal. Why is that an issue? I agree with that. That question, number one, stops a whole lot of folk from answering the census. Why is that a problem in your community? Because tax dollars are reallocated back to those regions based on pure population. And if your population is undercounted, that means that you have less money in the pot and a whole lot more hands that need it. And so you do not create opportunity for individuals to not feel safe answering the census. So you get an accurate count, which would ask for the US citizenship status of every person living in every household in America. This was first proposed by Trump in 2019 before it was later shot down by the US Supreme Court for being, quote, implausible and legally inadequate. They're just going to bypass the court's decision. At the time, critics argued that making such a change would discriminate against minorities and scare off immigrant households from participating in the census over concerns of their response, that their response could be used against them and their legal status. In turn, this could lead to immigrants being undercounted, meaning some states, mostly Democratic, would get less representation in Congress, less funding, and the list goes on. Here we are. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Sean Hannity, Charlie Kirk. These individuals have called for some version of violence against people who simply are concerned about the direction of the nation. You see, their patriotism is not love for country, it is love for Trump. And Trump is a proxy, a representation of the white male dominated power dynamic. That's it, nothing else. All right, Wos, thoughts here.
I love that they use this violent rhetoric to paint this country's quote unquote left when, in the past few years, all of the political violence that we've actually seen, whether you want to go from January 6th or you want to go to, the anti sort of ceasefire demonstrations of people who are pro-Israeli government, the violence has strictly been perpetrated by the right. Like that's where the political violence comes from in this country. And I know there was a time in this country where there were like environmentalist extremists and stuff like that, but we don't have that anymore. There is no political violence on the left. And so minus like an actual, the violent left to point to, what are we supposed to extrapolate from what this guy says? I think what he's saying is they're gonna be willing to crush skulls if people get in the way. That's what it means to say, oh, if the left allows it to be bloodless, then it will be bloodless. But if the left stands up for itself, if the left decides that they're gonna make their voices heard, we're gonna violently, beat them up, jail them, even in most extreme cases, kill them in the process. And so I don't see how you could read that as anything else if you take into account the actual truth and history and the facts of who's committed political violence in this country and who hasn't.
That's right, well said. And I want to make sure I make this point. He did not say this in isolation. He did not go on that show and all of a sudden decide to say what he said. This is planned. People who he rose with, they knew this was the opportunity for him to put this out there. And many are resonating on the right to what he said, and that is the current state of affairs.